In the days following King Solomon's death, Israel, once a beacon of faith and prosperity, slipped into a deep spiritual darkness. The people had slowly forgotten God's guidance under the corrupt reign
The
of
skies
King Ahab,
closed.
whose insatiable greed was matched only by the ruthlessness of his queen, Jezebel. Altars dedicated to lifeless idols began to dot the land, sacred sites were abandoned, and the blood of God's prophets stained the soil. Yet unseen and unknown to most, hope was quietly taking root. High in the remote hills of Gilead, God was preparing an answer. Elijah, a solitary man whose very name declared, "My God is Yahweh." Elijah was not what anyone expected from a hero. He was rough, bearded, and wore the clothes of a pauper. For years he dwelled in silence, finding solace amongst barren crags and whispering winds. But one day, God's voice shattered that silence with an urgent mission. Without hesitation, Elijah gathered his cloak, descended the hills, and strode into Samaria, Israel's royal city. As he walked through the palace gates, the guards froze. Something in his bearing, or perhaps some unseen force, stopped them from interfering. Elijah marched through echoing corridors, past cowering servants, into the throne room where King Ahab lounged in luxury, surrounded by idols and sycophants. With unwavering resolve, Elijah stood before the king and declared, "As surely as the Lord lives, the God of Israel whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in these years except at my word." Silence crashed down. In a moment, Elijah turned on his heel and disappeared, leaving behind a kingdom stunned into disbelief. Almost immediately, the skies sealed shut. Israel withered under an unrelenting drought. Crops failed, wells dried, and the songs of children faded as hunger stalked the weak and the proud alike. God sent Elijah east, hiding him by the lonely brook Cherith. There, in the solitude of nature, a miracle unfolded. Each day, ravens brought Elijah bread and meat in their beaks, and the prophet drank from the diminishing stream. These unclean birds, despised by many, became God's unlikely messengers, sustaining the prophet as the nation outside perished. The days blurred into weeks. As the brook slowly shrank and then dried entirely, Elijah did not complain. In his emptiness, he waited for God's next word. God's plan soon called for more boldness. Elijah was to leave Cherith and travel north to Zarephath, deep in Jezebel's homeland of Sidon, a place brimming with hostility towards God's prophets. At the city gate, Elijah met a woman gathering sticks, a widow, haggard and thin, her poverty a match to the famine wiping out nations. He called to her gently, asking for a little water and a piece of bread. She admitted with a tremor in her voice that she had only a handful of flour and a drop of oil left, enough for one last meal with her son before starvation claimed them both. Elijah encouraged her to trust, promising, "The jar of flour will not be used up, and the jug of oil will not run dry until the Lord sends rain on the land." Moved by hope or despair, she listened. Day after day they ate, and day after day the jars never emptied. But tragedy struck when her son fell ill and died. Overcome with grief, she blamed Elijah. Quietly, the prophet took the boy upstairs, stretched himself over him, and pleaded, "Lord my God, let this boy's life return to him." Then silence hung heavy until the child drew a breath and opened his eyes. The widow, hope restored, cried, "Now I know that you are a man of God." Years passed and the drought's grip tightened. But not every heart bowed to Baal. Obadiah, a steward in Ahab's palace, secretly hid 100 prophets in caves, risking everything to keep alive the last flickering sparks of faith in Israel. With the land on the brink of collapse, God sent Elijah back to challenge Ahab directly. The king and prophet met on scorched earth. Ahab, desperate and filled with rage, called Elijah, the troublemaker of Israel. Elijah countered, "It is you and your family who have brought this trouble by abandoning the Lord's commands." A challenge was issued. Ahab was to summon all Israel, along with the 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah, to Mount Carmel. Thousands gathered as the sun seared the bare mountain. "How long will you waver between two opinions?" Elijah cried. The test: 2 altars, 2 sacrifices, but no fire. Baal's prophets called, danced, and even slashed themselves in a wild frenzy for hours. Nothing happened. Elijah, alone, rebuilt the Lord's ruined altar with 12 stones for the tribes of Israel, doused the sacrifice with precious water, and called on God. Instantly, fire from heaven consumed everything: meat, wood, stones, and even the water. The crowd fell to their knees and shouted, "The Lord, He is God!" Elijah ordered the prophets of Baal ceased. They were taken to the Kishon brook and executed in accordance with the old laws of Israel. The people watched, awestruck, as clouds began to gather for the first time in years. On Mount Carmel, Elijah bowed in prayer, sending his servant repeatedly to scan the horizon. It was only on the 7th attempt that a tiny cloud appeared. Within minutes, the sky grew black with storm, the land drenched by torrents of rain, and Elijah, invigorated by God, outran Ahab's chariot back to Jezreel, a miracle as profound as anything witnessed that day. But the greatest battle was yet within. Jezebel, furious
While
at the death
Ahab
of her
wavered,
prophets, swore to kill
Jezebel
Elijah within
ruled
a day.
with ruthless
Terror
devotion
gripped
to
him.
Baal.
This prophet who had confronted kings and faced down gods now fled into the desert, despairing under a broom tree and begging God for death. In his exhaustion and anguish, an angel appeared bringing bread and water. Fed and strengthened, Elijah walked 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the sacred mountain where Moses once heard God's voice. In a cave on Horeb, God met Elijah, not in the fury of a storm or fire, but in the gentlest whisper. God listened to Elijah's desperate confession of loneliness and fear, then revealed there were 7,000 Israelites who still remained faithful. God gave Elijah new orders: anoint kings, appoint a successor, and know he was never truly alone. Elijah sought out Elisha, a humble farmer, and passed his mantle to him. With no hesitation, Elisha left behind his former life completely, burning his plow and sacrificing his livestock to symbolize his total devotion to the new path. But Israel remained mired in injustice. Ahab desired Naboth's family vineyard, but Naboth refused to surrender his ancestral inheritance. Jezebel conspired to have him falsely accused and executed, gaining the vineyard through blood. Elijah confronted Ahab once more, declaring, "In the place where dogs licked up Naboth's blood, dogs will lick up your blood, yes, yours." Shaken, Ahab humbled himself and donned sackcloth in remorse. God delayed disaster, but judgment was certain. Years passed. Ahab fell in battle, his body washed in the blood-soaked chariot, just as Elijah had foretold. His son Ahaziah tried to seek healing through idols and was met instead by Elijah intercepting his messengers, condemning the king with a prophecy of death. Attempts to seize Elijah led to fire-consuming 2 companies of soldiers. Only a humble third captain, pleading for mercy, was spared and allowed to escort Elijah to the king. Elijah's end came not by death but by glory. Sensing his departure was near, the prophet journeyed with Elisha through Gilgal, Bethel, and Jericho, testing his successor's resolve. At the Jordan River, Elijah struck the water with his cloak, parting it so both crossed on dry ground. When Elijah was caught up in a whirlwind, a chariot of fire between them, Elisha cried out in grief, but caught the fallen cloak, a sign the legacy would continue. Elisha, now empowered by Elijah's spirit, performed miracles and fulfilled God's commands. Justice fell on Ahab's house as Jehu carried out God's judgment. Jezebel too met her prophesied fate, thrown from a window, her body consumed by dogs. Yet Elijah's story did not end on that mountain, nor with his ascension. Centuries later, the promise was given before the great day of the Lord. The spirit of Elijah would return again to call the people back to faith. Thanks for watching. If you found this story meaningful or learned something new today, please give this video a like. It really helps us reach more people. And if you enjoy deep dives into history and powerful biblical narratives, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. Got thoughts, questions, or reflections? We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and may wisdom guide your path.